So, this is for a first Shlema for all the Cholim of Klal Yisrael, and continuing with the going through the final couple of parshiot of Devarim, and just a few things here. One thing that's, as we all know, one of the 10 commandments is Kibbud Av V'Em, which is honoring thy mother and thy father, because the two of them and Hashem were partners in our creation. So we don't, unfortunately, we take it for granted, take them for granted, and not many people think of this on a constant basis. It says here in Parashat Ki Tavo, cursed is he who shows disrespect for his father and mother. And it says all the people shall say Amen. Also, one of the things is when we were very young, toddlers up to high school, parents, they just give unconditionally without anything. They wanted the best for us, and parents want the best for their children. And some people forget that very quickly. And I mean, I'm notwithstanding people who were abused, unfortunately, I know some people who were abused by a parent or both parents. And I'm not judging, but I know a certain family where the parents really are wonderful people, and they try their best to bring out their kids in the best way they saw fit. And the one son only phones them when he needs money. I know this particular family personally, and he's not really interested in and they're in their 80s, and he's not really, and they're really innocent, they're really decent people. So I'm saying, look, I don't think he was abused, but one has to just always keep in mind to contact them and be in touch with them as much as possible, or even if it's once a week, on a regular basis, as regular as can be, just to know that you're thinking of them.
Okay, that makes sense. So so you're saying that the obligation is on the younger person to just keep up the communication, etc.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, I messed that one up. So let's continue. Maybe I can come right through Bava Kamma.
No, Gavin, you didn't.
Give them nachas through my learning. No,
Gavin, your parents are getting great nachas. No, Gavin, you tried.
Yeah.
Your case is not.
Yeah, no, it was a little bit. What's it called?
Challenging.
Yeah, it was a little bit maybe unconventional, a little bit challenging. So it was a little bit harder than normal, but still, I should have.
No, but you tried. You did try.
I'm quite a tough.
No, you did.
I should have been better. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's continue with the shiur. It does give nachas, and that's how I'm doing it now.
Yeah, look at their son who's learning Torah.
Yeah,
they never would have thought that ever. Look at that.
Never. I'm sure they fall over backwards daily because of that.
Yeah.
Hey guys, let's get into the shiur.
So I'm just not going to look at the screen. Excuse me, if I look this way, I just want to give my eyes a break. I'm listening. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to unpack it piece by piece, just to give you guys final clarity, just for a bit of revision. It's important. Because Arthur, I know it's difficult for you, but you're tired at the end of the day. You have to multitask. You've got to shop. You've got to sort out things. So, and sometimes it's difficult if you're not looking at the screen.
My uncle passed away today.
So let's do the Nishmat, your uncle, Arthur.
Well, I don't know his Hebrew name.
Just give his English name.
Give his English name.
Maybe do it tomorrow or something.
Okay, well then you'll find out tomorrow. All right.
Okay, so he used to work with your cousin. Your uncle or whatever. Cousin, remember? The one after? Markovitz? Markovitz on the...
really? Yes.
Guys, let's do this show, because this is important. So let's just go principle by principle of what happened. The first thing we looked at is our particular Mishnah. And our Mishnah stated, if the robber gave the money to the Mishmar of your Hayariv, and the Asham offering to the Mishmar of Yadaya, he is discharged his obligation. Why? Because your Hayariv is the Mishmar that occurs before Yadaya, and if he pays the restitution for that which he stole first, before he makes the Asham for the false oath to the Mishmar after which is Yadaya, he has discharged his obligation because he has performed the atonement in the correct order. You cannot state you're sorry for doing something, and the Gemara refers to it as the Asham is complementary, not as in complementary free. I think, sorry, the word complements restitution, because the false oath, hang on, Ken, the false oath only occurred because he stole the money, and therefore he was trying to get out of paying it, so it's as if he stole it twice. So the first thing is pay the big principal back before you say you're sorry, and then bring a ram of atonement, which could be a paltry amount in comparison to the principal of a couple of 100,000 rand. Although in rand, a couple of 100,000 isn't a lot. Let's call it dollars to make it spicy. Kevin, you have a question?
Did you say complementary? It's either with an E or an I.
No. So I said I changed the word complementary because complementary means free. The Gemara used the term to complement. The Asham is used to complement the principle, meaning is that if you want to complement a dish, it's an addition to the dish. It's not the
To
dish.
enhance it.
Yeah, in other words, because the false oath is a big problem, but it was only caused because of the greed that caused you to rob in the first place. Now, I don't mean you as in the pronoun you, Kevin. I mean, I've gotten into trouble this year for using the wrong pronouns, but that's an entirely different conversation. So that's what the Mishnah states. But there is a law that if he gave the Asham to your Hayariv, which was the first Mishmar, and the principal to Yadaya, you've got a big problem because it's occurring in the wrong order. You can't say you're sorry if you haven't made restitution. So if it's in the wrong order, if the Asham does not exist anymore because your Hayariv offered it, then the robber has to bring a new one. But if the Asham is still extant or still exists, and the members of your daya received the principal, what has to happen is your Hayariv has to transfer the Asham offering to where the principal is with Yadaya. Now, I want to ask you why.
Your Hayariv has to transfer the principal to Yadaya.
No. Not the principal. Yadaya's got the principal. Yadaya's got
So the Asham.
So the Asham, if it's still in existence, your Hayariv has to give the Asham to where the principal is with Yadaya. Why is that?
Because the Asham, the principal must be paid, then the Asham must be offered or given.
No.
Be done in that sequence.
We know that. We've established that there's a correct order. The first Mishma, which happens to be the family of your Hayariv, one has to make restitution if they're robbed. And then either simultaneously, as Kevin suggests is the best thing, but if he cannot afford it, the robber gives the Asham afterwards to the Mishmar of the week that he can afford it, which would be either the following week or the week after that, etc., as long as the principal is paid before the Asham. Now, what I'm saying is if your Hayariv had already sacrificed the Asham, then the thief has to replace, the robber has to replace it and bring another Asham offering. But if the Asham, oh my God, guys, my tongue is twisted. So if the Asham is still in existence, then your Hayariv has to give that Asham to Yadaya, because Yadaya has got the principle. It was done in the wrong order. Why does your Hayarev, Kevin, have to give the Asham back to Yediah? Why can't Yediah give the principal to your Hayarev? Why must the Asham go to where the principal is? And whose opinion is it according to yesterday?
I don't know about the opinion, but maybe, forgive me if I'm off track here, because maybe the Asham was given inadvertently, incorrectly before the principal was paid, so it has to be given again.
No. We're saying if the Asham is already sacrificed, it's too late. The robber has to bring a new one because it's invalidated. You're completely correct. But if the Asham is correct, is still intact, and your Hayarev never gave it that week, in the next week when the principal was paid to Yediah, somebody of Yediah happened to say, well, okay, cool, when are you bringing the Asham? And he turned around and said, I brought it already. And the men of the Mishmah said, what do you mean you brought it? He said, no, I brought it the week before to your Hayarev. So Yediah can turn around to your Hayarev and say, listen, bring the Asham to us. We're going to sacrifice it at the same time as the principal. Why is it that the case and not that the principal has to follow the Asham since it hasn't been sacrificed and they both go with the first Mishmah? That's the question I have. Arthur, can you answer it? I haven't tested Arthur in a while. He's been very lucky.
I am so exhausted. You have no idea. Actually, quit my other job. I told you because by Wednesday I can't even think. All
right, you tell me your tale of woe just now. That's okay.
Well, you tell me your woes every day. That's fine. I'm used to it.
Oh God. All right, no more sure they don't give you attitude if they can't answer the question. No, I'm kidding, Arthur. I'm kidding, man. Jesus. Kevin, you want to answer it? Gavin, you want to answer the question?
Yeah, I've got an idea. I think I've got the right idea. Not the right answer, but I've got the right idea. So I'll get us close. I'll get us closer. So I think it was the sages who, but I'm not good with names. I think it was the sages who ultimately said that it has to be the what's it called, the Asham that goes through to the principal as opposed to the principal going through to the. I think it might have been what's it, Rabbi, or what's his name? One of those guys that said that it must go to that the principal must that the Asham must follow. Oh no, sorry, Asham following the principal wasn't the sages; it was the other way around. The sages said the principal.
God, Gavin, you had the right answer. I was hoping for
I had the right answer
for you. So, but why? I'm asking you why. What's their issue?
Why it must go from? So I thought it was the sages. So I was right. I'm getting mixed up.
Listen, you had it 50-50.
So the sages. So why did the sages say that? Why did they say that the Asham must go to the
principal?
To the principal, because is it because of the sequence problem or not?
Well, okay.
Well, that's what happened, but that's not the reason. He's saying it's not the reason.
No, I want to answer the reason. I know the reason. I
know more or less. I can't think of it exactly.
All right, so let me.
I mean, my motivation. I don't know if it's theirs. My motivation why the Asham should go to the principal is the principal is your primary thing, and any ancillary thing that is associated with should always be linked back to the primary. And it's pertinent that the primary thing is for this guy to give back the to give back that principle. Okay, that's the most important.
So to answer your question, which is a good point, is that if the Asham joins the principal or the principal joins the Asham, whatever's primary and the others is ancillary, either way they'll meet each other. It doesn't matter which way it's done. So that's not the reason. The reason why your Hayarev has to give it to Yediah is because they accepted the Asham prior to receiving the principal, and they were in breach of the law. That's the problem. because they acted inappropriately. That's why they've got to relinquish the asham, Gavin. It's not the reason because the principle is the most important, because whether the principle comes to the asham or the asham to the principle, as long as they're both together, the goal is achieved. If you're dealing with one or the other in sequential order, the principle has to come first, and that's the very reason why the Yohayariv erred, because they should not have accepted the asham without the principle, and they're penalized by not enjoying the portions that the Kohen
yes,
are
that's
entitled
I remember that.
They shouldn't be entitled to benefit by accepting the asham before asking where the principle was, and therefore your Hayariv hasn't transgressed according to the Mishnah. The Yedaya hasn't transgressed because they accepted the principle. The asham being accepted before the principle made your Hayariv transgress, and therefore they cannot get the benefit of enjoying the meat and the hearts. So that goes to Yedaya. They're penalized for acting inappropriately. So that's the reason according to the Mishnah. Now we've got a bit of an issue. What's the issue of the next step, guys? Is that the rabbis taught a related brisa, and it seems to imply that it's not so straightforward. And I'm going to explain the case. So we said, if the robber gave the asham to the mishmar of Yohayariv and the money for restitution to the mishmar of Yedaya, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. In other words, Yedaya must release the money to Yohayariv, which is a completely opposite opinion to our Mishnah. And these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. But Gavin was right with his first instincts when he said the asham reverts to the place where the money is. In other words, Yohayariv must release the offering to Yedaya. So there's two different opinions, according to the brisa. The sages that concur with the Mishnah and say that the asham has to follow the principle because the Yohayariv should have never accepted the asham before the principle, and therefore they're penalized by not getting benefit of the meat nor the hearts. Now Rabbi Yehuda is saying no. He's saying that the principle has to follow the asham. So what is the case under discussion? So it's obviously, guys, got to be a case where it's a little bit more complicated. So if you want to say it's a case where the robber gave the asham to Yohayariv during the week of Yohayariv's watch, and then gave the money to Yedaya during the week of Yedaya's watch, then we don't understand why Rabbi Yehuda would rule that the money should go to Yohayariv. Because accordingly, you could say, listen, each mishmar kind of messed up, and at the end of the day, it should just stay exactly where it is if you want to be lackadaisical. If you want to be exacting, you've got to turn around and say, well, there's a bit of a problem. The only mishmar that messed up was Yohayariv because they accepted the asham prematurely, but Yedaya didn't do anything wrong. So we've got to see at what case Rabbi Yehuda is focusing on the fact that it switches and they are penalized. So we only get that explanation from Rava, who says that in our particular case, we're dealing with the robber. Pam, I'll wash it. You don't have to worry. Wash it. We're dealing with a case where the robber gave the asham to Yohayariv during the week of Yohayariv's watch. And he also gave the principle of what he robbed to Yedaya during the week of Yohayariv's watch. So here's where we found the problem, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that since it's not the week of Yedaya's watch, and Yedaya accepted the payment improperly, we penalize Yedaya. Therefore, the money refers to the place where the asham is. And why? In other words, Yedaya must release the money to Yohayariv, because Rabbi Yehuda is turning around and said, listen, the transgression of the mishmar, taking what doesn't belong to them at all, because it's not their week to serve, is a higher level of transgression than just accepting an asham when the principle wasn't paid yet. Because the one, according to him, is like outright theft. Other one is an issue where they never took it from another mishmar's watch. They only wronged the robber. Whereas in this case, they robbed the other men of the mishmar. So who's more innocent, a robber or the men of the mishmar? Probably, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the men of the mishmar on a higher level. So if you want to take it out of turn and take from the men of the mishmar when it's not your week, that's to him a higher transgression than taking from a thief. Get what I'm saying? So he's making the priority that if you erred and you sneaked in and took something that was not during your watch, that's more of a penalization and it has to revert back to the asham. But the rabbis hold that the members of your Hayariv acted improperly in accepting the asham before receiving the restitution money. Therefore, we penalize them and the asham reverts to the place where the money is. So your Hayariv must release the offering to your daya. So all we are saying is that Rabbi Yehuda favors penalizing the mishmar that took something which by right should have gone to another mishmar. And since Yadai had no justification for accepting the payment during your Yariv's watch, it's got to release the money to your Yariv. The rabbis, on the other hand, are favoring penalizing the mishmar that was derelict in its temple duties. Since your Yariv ought not to have accepted an asham, whose owner still owes restitution, they must release it to Yadaya. Now, guys, it's obvious that this only pertains to a case when Yadaya accepted payment during your Hayariv's watch. Rabbi Yehuda actually does agree with the rabbis that if the robber waited until the following week and gave Yadaya the money during its watch, we let Yadaya keep it and we would penalize your Hayariv for accepting the asham before restitution was made. So he's saying in a case where only one of the mishmars transgress, they lose it and give it to the other. So if each one did it in their right watch, he agrees with the rabbis. He's just saying in a case where one of the mishmars took it from the other mishmars, that's a higher transgression in his opinion than accepting the asham prematurely before restitution. So that's where he's coming from. Is the case a bit clearer now, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now that we've dealt with that, the Gemara has to cite a brisa which is giving some substance to Rabbi Yehuda. And Rebbe said, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the members of your Hayariv went ahead and offered the asham during their watch, the robber must repeat and bring another offering, asham offering, if that's the case, because, well, it's offered, it's gone. So the robber has to bring another one. But the second time round, Yadaya gets to offer it. Because why should your Hayariv that accepted it get the benefit twice? It's bad enough they got the benefit of the first time out of turn. But the troubling thing that we've got is, why does your Hayariv get to acquire that which is in their hands? What does the Gemara mean? Even though they offered the first asham improperly, they receive its Kohanic portion. And the Gemara says, well, how can that be? Firstly, it's not a valid asham offering because the principal wasn't paid. So since it didn't fulfill its mandate, then the Kohanim, that part of their service is eating, because they guests of the Most High, etc., they can't partake of it because it was an invalid offering. It's disqualified, actually. So the meat can't be eaten. So what does it mean they've gotten some sort of a benefit? How? So Rabbi says, listen, the meat for sure can't be used because it's a disqualified asham. However, they can't use the hides. Okay? Now, not everybody agrees with Rabbi, because there's some opinions say that they shouldn't they shouldn't benefit at all. But according to Rava, it's not that they're benefiting, it's that the part of the offering is eating. And if that's disqualified, they can't eat of it because it's not part of the service. And therefore, they're not entitled to it if what they're not providing is a divine service. It's not theirs. It's given to them by Hashem. But the hide itself, is not part of the Kohanic service, and therefore they can. But I'm sure those that disagree with robbers say, why should we reward them at all? They've cost the robber money. It would be interesting to note if Rabbi says that they contributed all to the hard. I'm not sure. So it was taught in a brisa, this is a related brisa, that Rebbe said, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the asham is still in existence, in other words, your Hayariv didn't offer it during their week, the asham reverts to the place where the money is. So your Hayariv must give the offering to Yediah, because at that particular point, Yediah didn't do anything wrong. So that is a bit of a problem. Okay, why is Rebbe's explanation of Rabbi Yehuda a problem, Damon?
Maybe because of the order.
Excellent. So what Gavin noted is there was a brisa that stated, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, he's saying the men of Yediah that were out of turn and accepting it, the offering during the watch of Yehoyariv, they were out of line, and therefore the principal must go to the asham, which is less of an offense that they owed in accepting the asham. Here it's saying that if the asham is still in existence, Rebbe is seeming to say that Rabbi Yehuda is holding like the sages, and the asham must revert to the principal. So it's a contradiction to the opinion in the brisa before. Rebbe's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda is a contradiction to the rabbis teaching Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in the brisa. So the Gemara is saying, well, how do you reconcile both of them? So it's a case where the week of your Hayariv's watch concluded, and your Hayariv did not demand money of Yediah. And Rebbe informs us this novel point. Since the men of your Hayariv did not demand restitution during their week, they have waived their right to the men of Yediah. Therefore, Rav Yehuda agrees that Yediah may keep the money and even receive the asham. So what we learn from here is that when Rabbi Yehuda ruled that the money reverts to your Hayariv, because Yediah accepted it when it was not their mishmar, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic relinquishment, but that your Hayariv can make a claim against Yediah and exact it. But if the men of your Hayariv didn't bother to demand it during their week, once their week is up, they're no longer serving in the temple, they've waived that right. It's not a legal case where they get sorted out afterwards. They can only eat of it if they're in service that week because they're offering it to the Most High. So since the week's gone apart, it's the week of Yediah, and now Yediah is having to give away the principal. But the atonement has to be made, and since the asham is still in existence, we make sure the robber is well looked after, and Yehoyariv has to give it to Yediah, because it makes practical sense. It's Yediah's week. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. So it makes a lot of sense that you have to actually bring up the case within that week. It's not an automatic point. So there's a... Excuse the screeching in the background. I pray for...
We actually can't hear it.
Didn't hear a thing, Damon.
All right.
Didn't hear a thing.
May you not hear when my wife screeches at me. All right.
Are you sure it's not all in your head, Damon? I'm just asking.
Gavin, Kevin and Arthur could be figments of my imagination for all I know.
Couldn't it be one of the cats from Renana, Damon, that you're going, that's traveling, the sound is traveling to you?
I know a cat that lives in Renana. Anyway, let's get back to the shira. I've got a few minutes. So there's another related brisa. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, if the asham is still extant and in existence, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. So why? Because if the asham is sacrificed, it doesn't provide any beneficial atonement. But if it does exist, the money reverts to the place where the asham is. In other words, Yediah must release it to your Hayariv. So when is that? Obviously, when Yediah has tried to take the principal, when the principal should have gone to your Hayariv with Asha. So they penalized for taking their Mishmar out of turn. So the Gemara says, okay, so that's obvious. It's like this point that Rebbe is bringing now. Well, what's the point of it? We've learned this before. So what is Rebbe bringing that's new? What does he actually inform us? And the Gemara says, Rebbe gives us an actual novel point. We're dealing with a case here where the watches of both of the men of Yohayariv and those men of Yediah concluded. In other words, each of the Mishmars lasted a week. Neither of them demanded anything of the other. And therefore, you might have thought that they both waived their right to each other. And accordingly, Yohayariv should keep the Asham and Yediah should keep the principal because that's the order in which they paid. And Rebbe informs us and says, no, it doesn't work that way. Because since even Yediah did not demand Asham for Yohayariv during its watch, they revert back to the original rule to which Yediah must release the money to Yohayariv. So in other words, if during Yohayariv's watch, they never brought it up to Yediah, the Asham is still in existence. Practically, it must follow the principle for restitution. They must be sacrificed together. Yediah is finished for the week. They didn't bring up the case. Yohayariv is finished for the week. They didn't bring up the case to Yediah. They've lost the opportunity. They can't partake of the meat. Who's serving now? It's Yediah. And since Yediah is serving now, Asham must go then to Yediah where the principal is, so the robber can get restitution. Now, if Yediah, during their particular week, never raised an objection and asked for the Asham, okay, and wanted to sacrifice the principal, and you figured, well, this one keeps the Asham and that one keeps the principal. It's not fair to the robber, because then technically, well, what do we do there? What do we do there? So, in other words, the failure of each Mishmar to enforce its right during its week doesn't make both Mishmarot entitled to keep that which they received. The original law goes back into effect. Yediah penalized and forced to relinquish the money that is accepted during Yohayariv's watch. So Yohayariv receives the money in addition to the Asham that it accepted initially. So in other words, if Yediah doesn't say to Yohayariv at that point, hey, you took the Asham inappropriately, then it's a problem. If they don't bring the case, then that has to then they've actually messed up Yediah, because now the principal's offered, and then the Asham could have been given the person atonement immediately. So what happens is then Yediah doesn't get the benefit of the Asham if they haven't woken up quickly. And you have to wait a 24-week cycle before Yohayariv gets to keep the Asham and sacrifice it again. So the bottom line here is that they do try and look after the robber's needs to make atonement, but each Mishmarot has to bring it up to the other. And it has to be dealt with fairly for the robber's sake. All right, guys, that's pretty straightforward. I think we are done. Any questions before we finish? I know we're going to finish a bit early, but I'm sure.
I was thinking of something. How much time do we have left there, Damon?
We got 4 minutes.
So let me just try a train of thought. Just give me a minute or two. Unless Gavin and Arthur want to ask me something. So it's going to such. I mean, it's going to such depth and discussing this in such detail. I mean, you know what I mean? It's such a, instead of just getting to the point, I mean, which is almost common knowledge or common sense.
Yeah, I know what Kevin.
Or isn't it common sense? Or isn't it? I mean,
so I tell you what, Kevin's has got a good point, because sometimes the Gemara, Michael used to find it frustrating, straying backwards and forwards and this backwards and forwards. So there are a few reasons for how the Gemara is learned like that. Is that they could give it in a simpler, more bottom line way. I think what it's trying to do is force you to think in a more expansive way and in a more lateral way, and to look at the fact that there could be different facets and factors involved in any decision. Why it has to be like this, I have no idea. After 120 years, we'll get the answer.
And
no
to put more meat on the bone, so to speak. So you're talking about offerings and rams.
So I'm offering no solution, but
yeah.
I'm happy to learn with you guys. Shame,
is there no Damon?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Is there no brisa about the thing that they're offering, Gavin?
Doing
and
a
there's meat involved.
Brasa. So brasa's once a month at Gary, brasa.
Yeah. Arthur, I'm pleased you gave up this client in Tel Aviv, or that found somebody. You're going to be feeling a lot better. It's a hell of a schlep for you, mate.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a schlep, Damon. It's a schlep to go by bus from Tel Aviv to Renana. And that's